begin. So basically, okay, this case study is not that difficult. Okay, however, okay, while going through some of the earlier scripts, okay, there are certain pitfalls that I'd like to address. Okay, so later on when we go through the question analysis, I would like you guys to participate. Okay, whenever there's something that you don't quite understand about how the answer key is structured, okay, please let me know. Meanwhile, okay, I do know that the scripts have been turned in. Okay, so I will attach the answer key right here. Okay, under Zoom. Okay, if not, okay, the updated answer key will be up by Sunday in the LMS folder. Okay, so you guys can download a copy of the answer key and take a quick look, okay, of how the answers are structured. Okay, so we will be quickly going through the questions together. Okay, like I've said every time, okay, we'll always start with the question first. Okay, and after that, okay, we'll be looking at the extract. Okay, so no point reading from front to back. Okay, it's always from the back to front. Okay, so I will go through questions by questions. Okay, I will not it's a bit different from what we do usually. Usually we'll go through the overall outline, but today I'll be going through question A, question B, question C, and question D instead of the overall outline. Alright, okay, so question A. Okay, we have to describe the trend in obesity among children and youth for the time period of 71 to 2004. And A part 2. Okay, explain the two possible reasons for the trend in obesity among children and youth. Alright, okay, so we can actually see that, okay, A part 1, okay, the diagram is actually here. Alright, so it's not a difficult question. Most of the students get this question right. Okay, they have no issues telling me that, okay, obesity across all the age group is generally increasing. Okay, so notice that there is an additional mark here. Okay, so you can state the general trend. Okay, this one is relatively easy. You can see that it's increasing across all the age group. Okay, it is the anomaly that I would like you guys to pay attention. Right, anomaly. Okay, so there are a few anomalies, okay, that I would like to address later. Okay, so if you like, okay, you can share with me later on. Okay, but okay, I just want to point out that, okay, the general trend is important. Why? Because we need this, okay, to address obesity among children and youth. So when I was marking this, okay, this was a problem, right? So for questions that are not data centric, okay, I just want you all to pen this down. All questions that are not data centric has to be okay, there has to be a concept that is tested. Okay, you have to identify the economics concept that's related. So can anyone tell me what is the concept tested here? In one sentence or one phrase, or rather to be more precise, one word. Can type it out now. Okay, what is the one concept that's tested here that you think that's tested here? Without looking at the answer key. I think I reviewed the answer key too quickly. Okay, try not to look at the answer key for now. What is the concept that is tested here? Remember, okay, I'm not concerned about your answer. I'm concerned about how you derive the answer. Quick, type it out. Okay, if not, we are going to end at 7 o'clock. 8 o'clock. Okay, so the concept, okay, as pointed out by one of you, is demand. Alright, so we have to screen through the extract to find out concepts that's related to demand, or in ACE or Econs, what we call Egypt. Okay, so I want you all to look through okay, which are the Egypt factors that you have stated. So now let's quickly hop into the answer. Alright, so for trend description question, make sure you identify the overall trend, okay, and an anomaly. Okay, so you can see that the overall trend, okay, obesity is generally increasing. Okay, this is quite straightforward. If you have, you will be awarded 1 mark. Okay, you can identify certain age group that experience a sharp rise. Okay, this is what we call a rate of change. Alright, there are some students who brought up a reversal. Okay, the reversal is actually very slight. Okay, but if you brought up a reversal for age 12 to 19, okay, between 1971 to 1980, I will consider that correct. Okay, I will consider that correct. Okay, but like I've said, always state the obvious. Okay, this one is more obvious. Okay, specific age group. Okay, they experience a sharper rise. Right? So if you have any questions, okay, please unmute yourself and ask. If not, you can drop it at the comment segment. Okay, so with that, I'm going to move on to A part 2. So A part 2 is actually testing us on a concept of obesity, and in this case is demand. Why? Because it's likely related to overconsumption of food. Okay, that's why it leads to obesity, especially junk food. Okay, so all the more it has to be demand. Okay, so I want you to check your answer. Okay, they should consider a few things. Or rather, it should consist of a few things. Number one, okay, it should consist of any of these alphabets here. Number two, okay, it should relate to an increase in demand. So check whether these two conditions are fulfilled. Okay, so I'm going to show you how are some of the answers going to turn out to be. I have several combinations that you can consider. Okay, most of the students brought out taste and preference. Okay, so especially towards junk food. Okay, you can cite the extract, and this leads to an increase in demand for food. Okay, which leads to obesity. So notice that this is Egypt. Okay, under taste and preference, and this results in higher demand. So these are the two key terms that I want to look at. Okay, it's important to identify the key concept. Okay, instead of going around the bush. Okay, some of the students wrote one whole paragraph. I don't know how to give marks because they are not identifying the wrong concept. Okay, so this is a classical example of not answering the question. See, taste and preference. Right. So the next one, could be rising income or affluence of parents. Okay, so no doubt obesity comes from the we were actually discussing on the Tuesday group. Obesity actually arises from the youths, okay, but it is the parents that are going to afford or going to purchase or going to give the youths pocket money, right? Okay, give me a second, let me off my email, it's very irritating. Yeah, okay, so income is a possible factor. Okay, although it's not in the extract. Okay, I'm going to show you a third one that's going to be more powerful. Okay, so when you're bringing income, make sure you relate to several key terms such as purchasing power, okay, and relate to higher demand. So for my H2 students, it's always good to assume that this is a normal good. Okay, normal good. Okay, it assumes that YED is greater than 0. If you don't have this condition, it's fine. Okay, but I would like to see the purchasing power and the demand term here. So a lot of students actually brought up factor 3, but they brought up in a wrong way. So you can see that extract 2. Okay, let's look at extract 2. Okay, this is the key phrase that is brought up. Junk food, okay, are less susceptible to inflation. Okay, so what they mentioned, or rather, several students actually did not have a good understanding of this term. Okay, so how do we want to play around this and convert this to a demand factor? Okay, so you have to relate this to healthy food. Okay, what is the relationship between junk food and healthy food? Okay, so the relationship is they are both substitutes. So you can see that if junk foods are less likely to rise as a result of inflation, okay, it means that healthy food is more susceptible to inflation, right? Okay, so we can interpret this, okay, that healthy food is going to experience an increase in price. Okay, so with an increase in price of healthy food, this will lead to a substitution effect towards junk food and a rise in demand for junk food. Okay, so this is Egypt. Okay, G factor. Okay, and this one is Egypt, Y factor. You realize that all these factors are exceptionally clear. So in any case, if you haven't raised up a specific factor, okay, you're probably heading towards nowhere. Okay? So I'm going to reject this. Okay, if you state that price of junk food actually goes down. Okay, prices of junk food going down, P of junk food going down, this is going to lead to a higher quantity demanded for junk food. This is not a demand factor. Okay, this is the conceptual error. Okay, so this is correct. Okay, higher quantity demanded, but the question requires demand. Okay, not quantity demanded. Okay, so in this case, okay, this is conceptual error. Okay, so check your answer, especially for those who bring in fall in price of junk food. I'm going to reject this. Okay, because the key concept is demand, not quantity demanded. Okay, so this is how you want to convert, okay, the last point, the interrelated goods, okay, into a substitute point and under EG. Okay, if you have any questions for me, please let me know. Okay. Alright, I'm going to move on to question B. Okay, B1 and B2, they are also related. Okay, maybe at the end of the setting, then you probably tell me how hopeful you are for your after I go through everything. You know, whenever I go through everything, students' face will turn from darker to even darker. I hope not lah. I hope not. Okay, so whatever that can happen, whatever things that can screw up here, good. Okay, but let's not repeat it in exam, can? Okay, so B1 and B2. B1 is a trap question. Okay, so B1, okay, I have mentioned this a lot of times, but if you somehow still get it wrong, okay, then I cannot help you. So why is B1 a trap question? Okay, so let's categorize this. Healthy and unhealthy, right? Junk. Do we agree? Yes? So a lot of students actually see this. Increasing, right? Decreasing, right? Okay, this is natural tendency, human behavior, sure. So I want you all to learn from this. If you get this question wrong, please put a star at your question and you revise. Look at the y-axis. So the y-axis actually tells you this is percentage change in your food prices. Right? So they are all positive. So what does the downward trend tells you? Okay, it tells you that your junk food is still experiencing positive price growth. That's why it's positive. Okay, but it is increasing at a decreasing rate. That's what it's telling you. Okay? So a lot of students tell me that the junk food actually experienced a fall in price, which is incorrect. Okay, look at the y-axis. It is always positive. The only instance that it actually falls is if this goes down. Okay, it cuts the x-axis. Then, okay, we can safely say that junk food actually experienced a fall in price. So such question is exceptionally popular, okay, to trick students, and more importantly, it will also come out from the point of inflation. Okay, inflation or year 2 topic inflation, they love to test this. Okay, so if you get this wrong, okay, make sure you learn from this. And why did I say that it's exceptionally cancerous? Because just like A part 2, if your B1 is wrong, if you did not identify that your price of junk food is increasing, there is no way you can score the full credit for B part 2. Okay, it's rubbish in, rubbish out. So make sure you score B1 first. Then we can safely address B part 2. Okay, maybe you guys will want to confess, okay, if you have got B1 wrong. If not, I will still look at your answer and I will still laugh at you. Okay lah, I'm not so bad lah. Mr. Teo is not so bad. Okay, I won't put a smiley face, but I want you all to learn from your mistakes. Clear? So for trend comparison question, okay, you would like to identify one similarity and one difference. Okay, and when the question uses change, okay, please convert it to increase or decrease. Okay, I don't want to see positive change or negative change. Okay, I will mark you down if you use positive or negative change. Okay, go straight to the question, increase or decrease. Okay, so as addressed earlier on, okay, this is a trap question. Okay, so especially for junk food, okay, it's still increasing because it's still at the positive region. Okay, so both healthy and junk food were generally increasing. Okay, if you illustrate a similarity, I want to see the keyword both. If not, I will mark you wrong. Okay, this is the key phrase to emphasize on similarity. Okay, so the key and likewise, I don't want to see any citing of the raw data here. Don't tell me increase by how many percent to how many percent. I don't need that. Okay, just illustrate in words. Okay, for the difference, you can see that healthy food is increasing at an increasing rate, while junk food is increasing at a decreasing rate, okay, or slower rate. Okay, so the second, or rather the second point is the key factor. Okay, so most of the students get killed, okay, in the first point. Okay, and the first point will result in because you interpret the data wrongly. Okay, your anomaly is going to be wrong. Okay, so part B, part 2 will be an entire failure. Okay, so 6 marks will be easily wiped out from your script easily. Okay, so maybe you guys want to type out who get this wrong. Okay, so that I will be mentally prepared for this question. Don't worry, your faces are not captured. Okay, so students candidates are careless. Y-axis is actually percentage growth. Yeah. So B part 2, okay, a lot of students did not score at all, okay, because like I've said, B1 is wrong. Okay, so your B part 2, you're supposed to address the similarity and difference. Okay, so likewise, okay, we have to identify what concept is related here. Okay, so the concept is to illustrate increase in price of healthy and unhealthy food. Okay, and therefore the concept that we want to use here is demand and supply. Okay, so remember, every question will have a concept. So your role is to identify which are the demand and supply factors in place. Okay, so I reckon that a lot of students didn't get this right. So if you have questions for me, let me know. Okay, if not, okay, when I go through, okay, there are certain factors that if you're not sure, also can ask me. Okay, so for similarity, okay, we can identify a demand factor. Okay, so this is related to the earlier part. Okay, so we realize that rise in income, okay, is going to result in higher purchasing power, okay, and a higher demand for both goods. Okay, and this will exert upward pressure on price. So notice that there's an important assumption, okay, that they are normal goods. Okay, so some of the students, they made the assumption that junk food is an inferior good. If junk food is an inferior good, there is no way that the demand will go up for junk food. Okay, and therefore it will not result in a higher price level. Okay, so remember, okay, this is a key assumption. Okay, especially if you are a H2 student. Okay, YED is greater than 0 for both goods. Okay, so most of the other factors, okay, don't really work well for this. For most of the other Egypt factors, okay, with the exception of Y. Okay, so for my viewers out there, if you have any other interpretation, let me know. Okay, if not, I would say that Y is the best factor for similarity. Now let's move on to the difference part. Okay, so we can see that your prices of your healthy food increases faster. Okay, so what factor attributes to that? Okay, you can use demand factor. Okay, so you can use taste and preference. Okay, so on top of income, we can see that because of higher taste and preference towards healthy food, people are more health conscious. The extent of your demand is going to increase faster. Okay, your demand curve for healthy food is going to shift more to the right as compared to unhealthy food. This is one way to illustrate that. Hey, you guys can take corrections. Don't blindly listen to me. Okay, I hope you guys are taking corrections. Okay, I believe there's a lot to take. I hope not, I hope not. Okay, please prove me wrong. Okay, so the next difference that you can consider, okay, is for H2 only. Okay, you can talk about the size of your YED. Okay, you can illustrate that the healthy food is a luxury food and junk food is a necessity good. Okay, so YED is greater than 1. Okay, this is 0, between 0 and 1. So when there's an increase in income, the extent of increase in demand for healthy food is higher, okay, resulting in higher price growth. Okay, so the key concept, okay, for difference 2, okay, is YED. Okay, is a deeper layer of Egypt. Okay, Egypt second layer YED. So if you realize that you get this wrong or you don't understand, please turn up for the J1 topical revision for YED. Thank you. Okay, factor 3 is actually quite interesting. It was brought up by the earlier batches of students. Okay, some of them brought up cost factor. Okay, under web picks. Okay, so you can actually illustrate input prices. Okay, so some of the healthy food, they are what? Okay, they are grown organically. Okay, so you can see that because of higher organic cost of input, this will result in higher production costs. Okay, so this will result in a fall in supply and okay, a higher an upward pressure on price. So this is a web picks factor. And I'm so sorry. Okay, maybe you should include fall in supply here. Okay, that would be good. Fall in supply. So there are 3 differences that you can use. Okay, so for my H1 students, you can consider difference 1 and difference 3. For my H2 students, all 3 differences, you just need to pick one. Okay, but difference 2 is the most creative use of YED. Okay, it's going to, like I've said, okay, it's going to test you on your concept of YED the most. Up to here, do I have any questions? Okay, are you guys are lost? Anyone lost? Lost in space? Okay, so if you use inferior good, then it's not going to turn out well. Okay, so don't use inferior good in this explanation. Okay, question C, okay, is the easy part. Okay, the calculation. Oh yes, just now did I manage to bring up? Oh yeah. Okay, never mind, it's okay. Okay, question C. Okay, let's look at question C. Okay, it's the easy part. Like I said, okay, this is a price elasticity of demand. Okay, so all you need to is to define. Okay, so most of the students did not define ceteris paribus. Or rather, did not include ceteris paribus. So I'm talking about. Okay, if you don't include ceteris paribus, you will not get the definition mark. So the calculation is fairly straightforward. You can look at extract 1 paragraph 5. Okay, extract 1 paragraph 5. It states this. Okay, a 10% increase in price of your sugared beverage will result in a fall in consumption by 0.78. Okay, so okay, this is negative 0.78. Alright, I just want to test you. Okay, can you all tell me whether sugared beverage here is price elastic or inelastic? Okay, please key this into the chat now. Elastic or inelastic? 0.78. Okay, great. Okay, so I just want to point out okay, there is a good reason why fat tax is being mentioned here. Whenever you see fat tax and elasticity, okay, it normally comes in a very good combination as a limitation for fat tax. So later on we'll see that. Okay, give me a second, let me turn on the light, it's getting very dark. Alright, so for a good student, okay, or rather a proficient student should be able to quickly identify the common links between elasticity and fat tax later. Alright. Okay, so we will leave this as a mental note for the very last question to be solved. Okay, under limitations for fat tax. Okay, remember to play around with elasticity as a limitation. Alright, okay, I am going to go through question D1 and D2 together. Okay, D1 and D2, okay, it easily takes up half of the weightage of the question. Okay, so some of the common mistakes or some of the common problems I've seen from the earlier scripts that I've graded. Questions are not completed, especially for D part 2. Okay, and for D part 1, okay, there's overwriting. Writing too much. Okay, and the third problem that I actually see is students fail to read D1 and D2 in totality. What do we mean by in totality? Okay, it simply tells us that students fail to account for fat tax when they address junk food, when they identify the source of market failure for junk food. Okay, which I will address in a short while. Why is there a need, okay, to look at these two questions as a whole? Okay, so with this, I'll just like you guys to quickly type out, okay, what is the source of market failure that you guys have identified earlier on. Type it out now, quick. Okay, great. I saw. Good choice, Alice. Not so good for Ravati. I'll explain that later. Okay, and this is what I mean by poor choice, okay, of identifying the source. Okay, so when you look at things at a totality, we will look at tax at D part 2. Tax is good in solving a specific source of market failure. It's not so good in addressing the other one. Okay, so for students who brought up negative externality, okay, this is the best winner here. Okay, so if you were to look things as a whole, okay, tax is to drive up production cost for producer, and producer will pass off the higher cost to consumer. Okay, and therefore consumer will have to internalize the external cost. Okay, so you have to have the foresight, okay, and plan ahead. So what happens is if you pick info failure here, it's not wrong. It's just that it is less superior or inferior to negative externality. Info failure is not wrong. You'll still score the full 6 credit, but you'll realize that you'll be stuck in P part 2. Okay, where you have to use fat tax to address info failure. Fat tax does not solve the root problem of info failure. Okay, only education does. Okay, so plan far ahead, see that if there's a pothole in front, avoid it. Right? So the pothole that you should avoid is info failure. Okay, and picking negative externality. The worst case scenario, okay, is this is the worst, identifying as demerit good. Okay, demerit good requires both negative externality and info failure. Okay, and this question only requires you to identify one source. One. Okay, so if you bring demerit good, okay, you have to bring in both negative externality and info failure. You have trapped yourself, and you realize that you'll be overwriting, and your answers will be diluted. Okay, because you're not going to hit anything. Okay, you have two sources of market failures to address. Okay, so read the question carefully. Only one singular source. Okay, just stick to one. Okay, so I pointed out, you should focus on this. If not, this is okay, but not as good. This is the worst. Okay, so I'm going to quickly run through the 6-step framework. Okay, for students in our program, you should be familiar with the framework that I've been using. Okay, so I will not go through the content-wise. Okay, it is not the time for content. Okay, and if you actually miss out, okay, this content or this topic, can catch up with our market failure series for our lessons. Okay, so the 6-step framework that I want you guys to identify, check whether the 6 steps are present. Okay, so step 1, okay, identifying and defining the source of market failure. So a lot of students identify negative externalities, okay, but they did not define them. Okay, so you want to talk about third-party costs imposed to others. And negative externalities in this case is a consumption-based externalities. So I want to see consumption being used here and consumer. If you bring in producer, I will mark you down. Okay, there is no case for producer here. Okay, as seen in extract 1 paragraph 2, okay, obesity, okay, is related to healthcare costs, which exerts a toll on the healthcare system. Okay, so you want to bring out step 2. Okay, identifying the MEC. So as a rule of thumb, whenever you encounter a market failure question or a seemingly demerit good, a rule of thumb is to always look out for negative externalities first. Okay, and if time permits, then you address info failure. The priority is always negative externalities. Okay? I'm not saying that all the time info failure doesn't work, okay, but you have to assign priority. So this is a third-party cost. So you have to relate to a third party, right? The third party is who? Taxpayers, right? Because as a result of people being obese and they take out hospital beds, okay, taxpayers will incur higher tax burdens. Okay, step number 3 is missing in a lot of scripts. So I want you all to check rational decision-making framework. Okay, so in your answer script, when I grade and return, okay, I will use the concept of RDMF. If I use the word RDMF missing, it means that you are not using the correct framework here. So I would like you to state what is the MPB and MPC of consuming junk food. Okay, MPC will be the monetary opportunity cost for consuming junk food. MPB will be the satisfaction and utility for consuming an additional unit of junk food. So a consumer will consume up to MPB equals to MPC to maximize satisfaction. Alright, so step number 4, okay, draw the proper diagram. Okay, for my RI students, I believe you use another separate diagram which I have attached in the appendix. Okay, so you can check the appendix later on. Okay, if you use the separate approach. Okay, so the diagram is fairly straightforward. Okay, by now we shouldn't get the diagram wrong. Okay, so step number 5. This is step 5. You've got to illustrate the divergence. Okay, as a result of the presence of the MEC, this leads to a divergence between the social and the private costs. And when you reference to the socially optimal level where MSC equals to MSB, this will lead to an overconsumption. So you want to state this as an overconsumption. Step number 6, dead weight loss. This is where a lot of students lose marks. Step number 6, a lot of students are not telling me how dead weight loss arise. So I'm going to quickly address here one more time. Alright, so you can use this concept of marginalist principle here. So you can see that at the private consumption level, at QP, your marginal social cost, MSC, exceeds marginal social benefit. So you have to state this. Okay, so what does it tell you? It simply tells you that when you're consuming at QP where MSC exceeds MSB, when you consume an additional unit of junk food, okay, the society now incurs a higher cost as compared to benefit it derives. Okay, therefore there is inefficient allocation of resource and a dead weight loss. Okay, so this is the key phrase that I'm looking out for step 6. Okay, so for my students, okay, make sure this 6-step framework is present. Okay, this is step 4, I miss out. Okay, draw the proper diagram. Right, so for my RI students, okay, I believe you are the only school that use that. Okay, it sucks to be lonely. Okay, but yes, okay, please use the correct diagram. Okay, so if you use this diagram, I will know how to mark. Okay, for the rest of non-RI students, please stick to Mr. Teo. Okay, don't reinvent the wheel. Okay, can? Alright, okay, so for info failure, I also accept. Okay, but you need to cite the correct case evidence. Okay, so you can see that people are not knowingly shopping for calories, extract 2. So what does it suggest? Okay, it suggests that people are not knowing what is the calorie intake that they have. Okay, and therefore this leads them to overeat because of info failure, unawareness of the calorie intake. So this approach is significantly risky because it does not address the concept of totality. Okay, and when you reach fat tax, you realize that fat tax and info failure don't see eye to eye. Very hard to solve. Doesn't solve the root problem. Only education can solve info failure. Okay, so I just want you all to make a mental note. Okay, so if D part 2 is testing you on education, then there's a good chance that D1 is info failure. You have to work backwards and see from the solution that they propose what is the problem that arises. Okay, so don't blindly illustrate. Okay, some of the students tell me that D1 is info failure, D2 they propose text. That's a bit funny. Okay, and likewise, a lot of students squandered too much time here. Okay, they stated both. Okay, and they cannot complete the last question. All right, up to here, questions for me? Do you all agree with my approach? Hey, it's okay to disagree. Okay, this program is very liberal. Okay, we can agree to disagree. But whatever that we go through, okay, you must have your own interpretation. That's the most important thing. How you derive the answer is more crucial than what is the answer. Okay, so this is what we have been advocating for the longest time. Okay, so I'll quickly wrap up with the last questions. Last question, I hope I can wrap it up within 10 minutes. So, fat tax. Okay, make sure you read things as a whole. Earlier on, we addressed that negative externalities is a better approach considering that we have fat tax. And to what extent tells you that there is going to be a limitation. To what extent and most effective measure. Okay, these two terms will tell us that there will be 2 additional conditions. Okay, condition 1, make sure you check whether there's a limitation. And just now we already went through PED. Okay, so if you want to impress your markers on how to use fat tax or how to critique on fat tax, you should consider PED being inelastic. Okay, that's a better approach to illustrate the ineffectiveness of fat tax. Okay, the second condition that is required here is you need an alternative. Okay, so check whether you have an alternative. So now I want you all to type out an alternative that you have used in this question. Have you all used an alternative in this question? What is the alternative that you have? Other than fat tax, or no alternative? Type it out quick. I'm going to point out some of the points that doesn't work really well here. Okay, you should not bring out a ban. Okay, although ban works, but a ban is not practical, right? Have you heard on ban on junk food? Right? Imagine a world without McDonald's would be quite sad, right? Okay, so avoid using ban. Education is okay so long as you can identify info failure as the secondary source of market failure. So I'm going to quickly run through. Okay, you can strike away public education. I'm going to use this too. Okay, I did not use public education. Public education you can use if you use info failure, okay, as your secondary source of market failure. Okay, I'm going to strike away this. I'm going to show you how does a subsidy for healthy food work. Okay, and notice that this is actually better. Why is that so? Because it was mentioned in the extract, okay, that there is presence of healthy and unhealthy food. Okay, so all the more you have to consider this as an alternative. Okay, so later on I'll show you how to develop this. Let's get the fact text right first. Okay, so if you haven't defined market failure, I think it's fine. Okay, because earlier on D1 has already kind of addressed that. Okay, so for fact text, I want you all to look at all these things. Okay, number one, okay, a fact text is going to be equivalent to the MEC. Okay, this will raise the marginal cost of production. Okay, and producers will pass off higher costs to consumers. So from a diagram perspective, it looks like this. So for students, okay, who fail to relate to diagram, please relate back to figure 1 and step 4. Okay, just show this. Good enough. Okay, a leftward shift in your MPC to the left-hand side. So the idea is consumers incurring a higher production cost will force the consumers to internalize the external cost. So this is the whole idea behind negative externalities of consumption. Okay, the intended beneficiaries or the intent is to target at the consumers who are over consuming. And it will cut consumption to the socially optimal level. Okay, a limitation for fact text, like I've said, okay, that PED is going to be better here. Some of the students brought out that it's difficult to estimate the level of external cost, sure. Okay, but like I've said, okay, this is better in the sense that, okay, demand of your junk food is going to be price inelastic. Okay, therefore, you are going to impose a very sizable amount of fact tax in order to discourage consumption of junk food. If not, okay, it will not reduce the consumption of junk food significantly. That's one way to play around. Okay, alternatively, you can consider the unintended consequence. So this is a constraint. Okay, so this form of limitation is called a constraint. Constraint on the fact tax. Alternatively, you can consider unintended consequence, a UC. So when we impose a fact tax, what is another problem that may arise? Then in that case, we can see that lower income earners will be affected. Okay, why is that so? We see that in extract 2, okay, the lower income groups are the greatest consumer of junk food. And they are going to be the most susceptible to increase in price. So we can talk about when there is an increase in price, okay, the lower income earners will result in greater level of inequity. Okay, so they'll be priced out of the market with insufficient dollar votes. Okay, so you can consider a UC here, unintended consequence, instead of a constraint. Okay, if you use the government having the approach I shared earlier on, okay, they do not know the correct level of external costs. They may not impose a correct level. That's also a constraint. Okay, up to here, so far so good. Okay, on the rigor, make sure you use the correct framework. Okay, please don't use demand and supply framework. Okay, I have seen students that use demand and supply framework for the last question. Okay, this question is about negative externalities. Okay, so you have to go back and use negative externalities question. The moment you draw demand and supply down here, okay, your confidence level that you project to the examiner goes straight to 0. Okay, anything that you write they are not going to take you seriously because they know that this is a joker. Okay, so remember to use the correct framework for the correct question, not demand and supply. Right, I'm going to show you all, okay, a better approach. Okay, so like I've said, education. Someone brought up education here. Education doesn't work as well, okay, because the market failure that we have identified earlier on was negative externality. Unless earlier on you identify info failure, then education kinds of work here. You can propose it as an alternative, but you realize that your thesis will be blank or will be flawed. Okay, you cannot carry on with your thesis with fat text. Okay, so the better approach is to consider a subsidy for healthy food. How does a subsidy work? I want you all to learn this. This is very useful. Okay, so a subsidy reduces price of healthy food. How does it work? Number one, a subsidy lowers the cost of production, right? So supply curve of your healthy food will go up. Okay, and this will result in a fall in price of healthy food. Okay, and with a fall in price of healthy food, we identify that junk food and healthy food are substitutes. This will lower the demand, or to be more specific, the MPB, okay, for your junk food. So from a diagram perspective, it looks like this. Okay, for my RI students, this is also applicable. Okay, it lowers the private demand of the good directly if you use a divergence between the two MSB and MPB curves. Okay, so you should consider this. Okay, lowering of your demand curve. So I'm going to show you why are there two colors here. Okay, number one, okay, when we lower private demand curve here, we can see that, okay, your maybe I change another color here, okay, to be more consistent. Okay, so identify this here. Okay, your MPB1 is going to cut your MPC, okay, at the socially optimal level. So we have successfully reduced private demand, okay, of junk food to the socially optimal level QS. This is on an optimal basis. Now, what happens, okay, as a limitation? Okay, so I'm just going to use the diagram to illustrate a limitation. You realize that MPB2, okay, is going to fall lesser to the left. Down here. Okay, MPB2 equals to MPC. Do you see that? Okay, and when we're looking at MPB2, the extent of your demand curve is falling lesser. It will result in a lesser extent of a fall in your demand. Okay, and Q2, okay, will be achieved. So this is the socially optimal level. Okay, so we are still a slight distance away from the socially optimal level. Do you see that? Okay, but we still reduce some demand no matter what. So what is the key concept that I want to illustrate here? Okay, so obviously the blue line is going to be more optimal than the red. Okay, because if you to reduce private demand all the way to the blue line, okay, we can consume at the socially optimal level. So the key concept that I want to illustrate here is it all depends on the level of substitutability. Right? So if junk food and your healthy food, they are good substitutes, then it will fall to the blue. The extent of your demand curve shifting will be shifting all the way to the blue. If they are weak substitutes, then your demand is going to shift lesser to the left, going to result in the red. So the concept, okay, that is tested under the limitation. This is a very favorite limitation that you can consider whenever you bring in substitutes as a form of alternative or policy. You can look at size of your XED. For my H2 students, okay, this is called size of your XED. For my H1 students, you don't need to know XED. You can talk about strengths of your substitute, whether they are strong or weak substitute. Okay, so we pray very hard that junk food and healthy food, they are good substitutes. Okay, that's on a good day. But if they are not good, or they are not a good substitute, then it will fall lesser to what? Lesser than optimal. Alright? So I don't know whether you all deem KFC and ginseng chicken as a good substitute or not. I don't know. Okay, to me, they are nowhere close. Yeah. Mr. Teo will always go for KFC. I don't know whether y'all concur with me. Ginseng chicken is too healthy for Mr. Teo. So far so good. So this is how you want to construct okay, the body paragraph, okay, and the limitation for your substitute. If you bring education, I will mark it separately, but you'll lose a sizable amount of marks because of your TCs already. Huh? So which I already saw some of the scripts already exhibiting this problem. So, okay, I have a very good synthesis for all of you to consider. So remember, the question assumes that there is only one market failure. There's only one source. Agreed? So if there is only one source, then whatever that we proposed down earlier on is going to be more or less useful, right? To address negative externality. So a synthesis questions on the assumption. So the assumption is this. Now we relax the assumption. So for earlier students who under D1 they brought up demerit good, then this is where you shine. Okay, what happens if there is also presence of info failure or imperfect information? If there is imperfect information, then fat tax or a subsidy of healthy food does not address the root problem. So this is where you want to bring in education as a synthesis, okay, not as a body paragraph. As a body paragraph, then you will lose out marks for your TCs under tax. But if you bring it as a synthesis, questioning the assumption of the number of root causes, okay, then you are going to impress the marker. Okay, you are going to illustrate that because of different issues, we need different policies. Okay, so if info failure, we need education-based policy, because education-based policy can address the root problem of unawareness. Okay, so this is how you want to play around with your synthesis. All right, so these are some of the points that I have gathered from the earlier batches. Okay, so you can read through. Okay, I don't recommend ban; it's not good. Okay, education-based policies that are accepted, provided you D1 you stated info failure. Okay, but you will lose marks for your fat tax. Okay, because it cannot address info failure directly. Okay, and try to recycle your diagram as frequent as possible. Don't redraw one. Every time you recreate a diagram, you are going to spend time to redraw. Okay, you are going to lose time in writing. All right. Okay, so with this, I hope you guys have greater clarity, okay, on addressing the, questions like this. Okay, what are the tips that I've shared with you guys? Okay, especially on planning ahead. Okay, looking out all the questions in totality. And identify for every question what is the key concept that is tested and using the correct framework. Alright, so for my students, if you have any questions for me, please stay back and ask me. Okay, if not, okay, for my non-students, if you find this useful, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, okay, and like this video. Okay, so with that, okay, I'm going to give thanks. I'm going to call it a day.